The lamp is low, and the house is the kind of quiet it has never been. And in front of you is a clean sheet of paper that will not fill itself. You have written the date. You have written the word father. And then you have sat for the better part of an hour, listening to the clock in the hall keep a time your father no longer has to keep, trying to decide how a person is meant to hold a whole life in a page, how you were supposed to stand up tomorrow in front of the town, in front of the state, and the men from Columbus in their black coats, and say what he was. They'll want the governor. That's what they're coming for, and you'll give them some of it because it's true and because he earned it. But the trouble is that you did not have the governor. You had the man who told these stories by the fire, and the page keeps asking for them instead. Start where he liked to start, because he always started low. He was a store clerk's boy from Owensville, back in the country. You've heard this 100 times. Son of a country merchant, weighing out flour and nails for farmers before he was tall enough to see over the counter. There wasn't much more to his name. There wasn't, in fact, even a middle name. The M he signed his whole life. The M on the ballots and the letterhead, and soon on the stone. Stood for nothing at all. He gave it to himself, as a boy, because he thought a man ought to have one. That was the first thing you ever understood about your father, that whatever he decided to be, he simply became, and then dared the world to argue. He was 16 when he went to the war. A store clerk turned soldier before he'd finished growing, and when it ended, another man came home to rest. He went to college and worked like a field hand to pay for it, teaching school in the mornings, hiring himself out to the farmers in the afternoons, reading law at night. You never once heard him call it hard. He told you about those years the way he told everything, like a good joke, and the joke was on anyone who'd bet against him. You write down store clerk, you write down soldier at 16. It looked so small on the page, and it was so large in his mouth. The climbing years you know better, because you were alive for the end of them. Law, then the insurance company down in Cincinnati, where the same trick worked again. He decided to run it, and in time he ran the whole concern. Then the State House, then Congress, where his one quiet boast was a thing most men would find dull. He helped win one of the first appropriations to carry the mail out to the farms, the rural routes, so a family miles from any town could have a letter laid in a box at the end of the lane. He liked that his name was on that, a store clerk's boy who never forgot the people at the end of the lane. And somewhere in the middle of all that climbing, he bought a house, this house, Cromont. Gone so strange and quiet around you now. The tall Italianate place on the hill above Milford, the finest in the county with its 4-story tower and its long view down over the river. He bought it the same year he married your mother. You have always thought of the house and your mother as one act, the year he decided he had arrived. Your mother's been gone 15 years. He carried you through that. Whatever else you manage to say tomorrow, remember as you say it that you were bearing the second of your parents, not the first, and that after she was gone, he was the one that raised you the rest of the way. Pen has stopped again. Then comes the part they'll want most. Ohio was Republican ground, had been as long as anyone could remember. And in 1905, the governor's chair belonged to a Republican who meant to keep it. Your father ran against him, a Democrat, a temperance man, a reformer who stood up in hall after hall and named the city's bosses out loud. He swore the state could be run clean. Everyone told him the math was impossible. But on a night in November, the math worked out. He beat a sitting governor by 40,000 votes, the only man on his own ticket to win. A victory so unlikely the papers could hardly explain it. You remember the house that night. You remember him at the very top of his own life. 58 years old, a store clerk's boy just made the chief man of 4 million people. And you remember thinking there was nothing left for him to climb. You were right about that. You were only wrong about why, because he was already sick, and you already knew it. And y'all said nothing, the way families do. The campaign had taken something out of him that did not come back. By the turn of the year, when they carried him up to Columbus to make him governor, the man who had talked his way into a war at 16 had to be helped to his feet. He gave his inaugural address, his voice thin, his color pale, and that address was very nearly the last thing he ever did as governor. He did not stay. They brought him home, up the hill, into this house, and the office of the highest man in Ohio came up the hill with him and moved into an upstairs room. That is the part you cannot make the town understand, and you're not sure you'll try. For 5 months, the state of Ohio was governed from a sickbed in Milford. The papers came up by the armful. The men from Columbus came with their folders and their pens and went away speaking softly. And your father, propped against the pillows, signed what he had strength to sign and let the rest wait. From the window of that room, you could see the whole town he had climbed out of. The spires, the river, the roofs along Maine, but you couldn't see Columbus. He never saw it again. The capital he had won was the one place his own body would not let him go. You watched the disease take him slowly. Bright's disease, the doctors called it. The kidneys failing by degrees, the strength leaving him a little more each week, while his mind stayed clear enough to know precisely what was being taken. That was the cruelty of it. He was never once confused. He lay in the finest house in the county, the house that was meant to be proof that he'd made it, and he understood better than any of the people who came to comfort him that he had reached the top of the mountain with no time left to stand on it. His birthday came in June, 59. You gathered as best you could. 5 days later, on the 18th, in the room with a long view of everything but the one thing he'd earned, he died. They swore in the lieutenant governor within hours. He was a Republican, and so by nightfall, Ohio was Republican again, exactly as it had been before your father's impossible November. The whole reform tide that had lifted him up the hill, risen and crested and drained back out in 161 days. That's the number the state will keep. The shortest term any elected governor of Ohio ever served. 5 months and a little more. The histories will file him that way. A tenure, a curiosity, the man who barely was. Let them. That's the governor's story. And the governor can have it. But you are not writing the governor's story. You were sitting in this silent house with his pen in your hand. You never noticed until tonight that it was his pen, trying to set down on paper the other thing, the true thing, the thing no history will carry. That before he was the shortest anything, he was a boy who gave himself a middle initial and then spent a life making it worth something. The store's clerk's son who never bet against himself. Taught you never to bet against yourself either. The father who buried your mother and stood between you and the cold for 15 years and never once let you see how tired he was. The town will remember 5 months. You will remember a lifetime. Tomorrow, in front of the black coats from Columbus, you will stand up and give them what they came for, and then you will give them him. You dip the pen. Outside past the dark town, the river he could always see keeps running below the hill. Inside, the page is still nearly empty, and the clock is still keeping its time, and your hand is warm around the cold barrel of his pen. So you begin to write.